Hey, it's George Chuang. I'm just going to point out some facts in this video. Now, for the record, I just want people to know that I'm not a Republican, nor do I support the Democrats. I'm not a champion for democracy, nor am I a communist. I am none of the above. This is my view on politics and nations, and here it is in Proverbs 14:34. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. That is my view on governments and politics. If a country is run by an authoritarian king, let's say his name is King David, if he is a good and righteous king, I will say that is good. Now, democracy has been good for countries in our generation, to the most part, but democracy can also end up being what it says in Judges 17:6. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Now, if what is right is evil in God's eyes, then you have a bunch of people doing evil and they think this is right and good. So personally, I don't care to support any world government except the government that Jesus Christ will bring. I support righteousness. Now, I believe God chose Donald Trump to be the president of the US. I have said I don't like his character because he's brash and he rubs people the wrong way, and his speech is not seasoned with salt. Now, I believe he was doing a good job as president of the US. Everything was going good. The impeachment was a sham and he was looking to win the next election by a landslide. But lately, I have been asking the question, Lord, what are you doing? Not that God didn't choose Donald Trump, but what is God doing? You see, China reported to the WHO about a pneumonia of unknown cause on December 31st, 2019. This is last year, just as the year was closing. You can get all this information on the WHO website. By January 11th, China had released the genome of the virus to the world, so they can study it, make testing kits, and whatever they need. This is January 11th. On January 13th, the first case outside of China was found, which was in Thailand. Now, understand, China has flights going in and out all the time. The coronavirus can stay hidden in the body for up to 2 weeks, and you could be contagious and not even know it. 80% of the people have mild symptoms, so they think, oh, it's a cold or flu. But by January 13th, it was confirmed to have made its way out of China. And I guarantee it was out long before that, but spreading unknown. On January 23rd, China had a little less than 1,000 cases. Probably much more because you can't test everyone. But on the 23rd, they began to seal off the city of Wuhan. They put a blockade to prevent anyone going in and out. This is way too late. But remember, the virus had already made its way out to Thailand by January 13th, and probably to other places already because the one who brought it to Thailand definitely spread it at the airport and airplane. Now, on January 31st, the Trump administration suspended entry of foreign nationals who pose a risk of transmitting coronavirus. You can get this information on Donald Trump's website. Problem is, there are lots of Americans who visit, work, and live in China. These are all potential carriers. Without a doubt, they were bringing the virus in undetected. Now, by early February, China had begun locking down the country. You would get one of these from the police. It's basically a permit. One person from each household is allowed to go out and buy food once every 2 days. Everyone else needs to stay inside. By the beginning of March, the Chinese government started allowing people out of their homes in less severe areas of the country. So for a month, they could not leave their homes except for the one getting groceries. In more severe areas, the lockdown was longer. The Wuhan lockdown will end on April 8th. But China, in general, where it wasn't hit so bad, was locked down for about a month. Now, we knew the virus was out and the world was already getting infected back in January. When Korea got an outbreak, they began massive testing and isolating. Their outbreak began on February 19th, and by the middle of March, they got it under control. They were hovering at 8,000 something for many days and just recently passed to 9,000, but it's being controlled pretty well. Now, Italy began its outbreak around the same time as South Korea, and it is bad there. So I'm watching these numbers go up. I'm seeing how contagious it is. Just by observing China, you know this virus is bad. And all this is happening in February, that these numbers are skyrocketing. Then almost a month later, it's getting close to the middle of March, and I'm seeing these posts on my Facebook feed. And God bless their souls, these are friends that I served the Lord with in the past. They're good Christians, but it's already March. And people should know by now how bad this virus can be. And this is what I'm seeing. Coronavirus is spreading, but the flu is a greater threat to Americans. And this is probably because Donald Trump likened this virus to the flu. So people were trying to downplay its seriousness. Donald Trump said on March 9, so last year, 37,000 Americans died from the common flu. It averages between 27,000 and 70,000 per year. Nothing is shut down. Life and the economy go on. At this moment, there are 546 confirmed cases of coronavirus with 22 deaths. Think about that. Basically, it's no big deal. Think about it. There's only 546 cases and 22 deaths. And this was on March 9th, when Italy and South Korea had already begun to explode in cases. Then there was this one being shared, comparing the H1N1 flu during the Obama administration to the coronavirus. People were trying to prove that this was nothing more than a hype. It was already the middle of March when I saw this one in my feed. The numbers were going up in the thousands daily. Facebook eventually took this one down because some of the information was wrong in there. The number of cases was already skyrocketing in the US at 10,000 plus cases, and this was still being shared. Then I'm watching the news, and what do I see? Spring breakers partying at the beach. When New York reached over 20,000 infected, there were still flights going in and out every day. Compare this to Wuhan, when China sealed off the city when there was less than 1,000 cases. The US went from 4,600 cases to almost 84,000 cases in just 10 days, taking the lead and the crown from China as the country with the most cases. Now, I don't believe in the numbers that China put out, but at least they got the virus under control. Their main problem now is people bringing it back in from abroad. But you look at what they did to control the spread of infection, and you compare that to the US. You can easily conclude how China managed to contain it. When did people in New York receive permits to leave the house? Never. That'll probably never happen. China's heavy hand approach will never fly in the US because people have rights. Whereas in Asia, most would agree this is for the greater good of the country. Let's get through this together. In the US, Asian Americans are now getting attacked because this is the Chinese virus. And some people think you get it from Chinese people. Forget the fact that they are Americans. There's just no unity. And this is an evil that dates back to the beginning of the nation. It's one of the devil's strongholds in the USA. Prejudice and racism. Prejudice towards Native Americans, African Americans, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, putting Japanese in concentration camps, hatred for Hispanics, Jews, or those from the Middle East. This evil has always been in the US. And before there was an ethnic group called white, the Europeans used to group in enclaves of Irish, Italian, German, English, French, and so forth. And they all had their prejudices against each other. Eventually, some got so mixed they just became white. But they continued their prejudices against other ethnicities. So this is an ancient evil that has plagued the US. Anyways, let's look at China's neighbors, such as Japan, South Korea, even though they had an outbreak, and Singapore, Hong Kong. Now, the Hong Kong government operates differently from mainland China, even though they are part of China. And look at Taiwan. They don't have a huge number of cases. Now, you may say, but the US is much bigger. Fine. Then just use New York City. They have over 29,000 cases with a population of about 8.7 million. New York more closely resembles cities in Asia, where it's densely packed. Let's consider Taiwan. There's 23.8 million people there. Now, although Taiwan was barred from membership in the WHO, they sprang into action the minute they found out about the virus. They weren't allowed to participate on the international stage, so they just did their own thing. On January 2nd, they immediately activated their Emergency Operations Center. They relied on their experience from the SARS outbreak in 2002. And as of March 28, there's only 283 cases on the island. Their new cases are from people returning to Taiwan. And let me tell you, there was a lot of traffic between mainland China and Taiwan, but they did a lot of screening early on. Now, China reported the virus to the WHO on December 31st, 2019. And 2 days later, Taiwan was on red alert when nobody knew anything about the virus. And they managed to keep the numbers down. Then you head to the US, and it's already March, and people are still likening it to the flu and downplaying its seriousness. And spring breakers are partying, and Mardi Gras is happening at New Orleans. And I just sit back, and I scratch my head and ask God, what are you doing? I read this article. Virginia pastor dies from coronavirus after previously saying media is pumping out fear about pandemic. Virginia man who downplayed the seriousness of the coronavirus as merely the media pumping out fear has died after contracting the virus. Landon Spradlin, 66, a pastor and traveling musician, died on Wednesday, March 25th, at a hospital in North Carolina after testing positive for COVID-19. As first reported by Patch, nearly 2 weeks before his death, Spradlin shared a meme on his Facebook page suggesting the media can manipulate your life. The post compared the mass hysteria surrounding the number of deaths from the coronavirus in the US while Donald Trump has been president compared to the deaths from H1N1 under Barack Obama's administration. And he was probably sharing what I showed you earlier. Lots of Christians were sharing that. In the comments section underneath the March 13th post, Spradlin wrote that while he knows COVID-19 is real, the real issue is the media is pumping out fear and doing more harm than good. It will come and it will go, he added. Spradlin is one of 2 people to be recorded to have died from the virus in North Carolina. The second being a patient in their late 70s. Hold on. In all of North Carolina, only 2 people died, and God allows this pastor to die from it after he downplayed its seriousness. Listen, any angel could have said, no, don't go that way. You'll get coronavirus and die. Don't touch that. But God allowed it, maybe to prove a point. Listen, I am a firm believer that God allows premature deaths. It's all over the Bible. There are lots of things you can do that could result in a premature death that was not in God's plan. Disobedience, doing stupid things, overdosing on drugs, downplaying the seriousness of a highly infectious disease, and lots of things can result in a premature death. Now, if you're perfectly healthy and you just drop dead or died in a car accident that was not your fault, I would say that was God's plan. You don't know how many days you have on this planet. But what I find so ironic is that this man downplays this virus and says, oh, it's nothing but hype. It'll pass. And then God takes him out with it 2 weeks later. I have to ask the question, God, what are you doing? The American public and so many Christians were completely blinded. And then all of a sudden, in just a couple of weeks, bam! The US takes the lead in the number of infections. It's like the Lord was prepping the people and gave them a leader that could not see how serious this could be. Back in January, when all the nations around China were gearing up and upping their defenses. And many Americans were saying it's the flu. And all the medical experts were saying this is serious. But the president said,
view this the same as the flu. When somebody sneezes, I try and bail out as much as possible with the sneezing. I had a man come up to me a week ago. I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I said, how you doing? He said, fine. He hugs me, kisses. I said, are you well? He says, no. He said, I have the worst fever and the worst flu. And he's hugging and kissing me. So I said, excuse me. I went there, I started washing my hands. So you have to do that. This is, I really think, doctor, you want to treat this like you treat the flu, right? And, it's going to be fine.
And many Americans were treating it like the flu, whereas countries in Asia treated it like SARS and MERS, which are deadly diseases. Some instituted travel restrictions, lockdowns, massive testing, virus tracking, and whatever they felt necessary to stop a highly infectious disease. And when things started getting bad, President Trump says, I just wish China told us earlier. And that is correct. China screwed up big when they tried to hide it. Doctors in China said, what is this? It's like a new SARS. The police said, you're going to scare the public. Put that information away. Stop spreading rumors. And let me say, when you have people who are not in the medical field telling medical professionals how to do their job, you're screwed. They had no clue what they were dealing with and lost precious time. The higher-ups eventually reprimanded the police because this time they know they screwed up big. But even if they made this known earlier, no one knew how contagious it was or how deadly. Thank God it's not as deadly as SARS. SARS was much more deadly. But COVID-19 is much more infectious. So let's say they made this known earlier to the WHO. What would President Trump have done with this information, considering he was likening it to the flu in March? The doctors didn't know much about the virus in December. By January, they weren't even sure how it was being transmitted. But even if they reported it immediately, the way it stealthily transmits and can stay hidden for 2 weeks, it was going to get out. No country is going to put a blockade on a city of millions. because they found a virus in, say, 50 people, and they don't know if it's very contagious or if it's deadly because there's just not enough information yet. New York City is past 29,000 cases, and they never stop people from leaving the city. But this is the most important part. This virus has gone worldwide, and God knows about this. If China reported on it earlier, I'm sure it was still going to escape the city. I think there's a possibility that an upheaval is coming. God is up to something. I don't know what it is yet. I just ask God, Lord, what are you doing? And because we don't know, we got to stay safe. Take this virus seriously. Now, we're waiting for the end time Elijah to come on the scene, right? Let's go back to the Old Testament for a second. What happened when Elijah came on the scene? There was no rain. There was famine in the land. And there was also war. That's not good. Now, the end time Elijah will come at the first seal. Then what comes after him? The second, third, and fourth seals, which are war, famine, and death. That's not good. And they will have power to kill a fourth of the earth. Now, maybe this virus will die off and there won't be an upheaval at this time. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe the Lord will give more time before the Ephraim prophecies start being fulfilled. The U.S. will eventually be a fading flower, and the drunkards of Ephraim will be trampled underfoot. I don't want to see that. I grew up in the U.S. I love America. Not the government, the crooks, and all the junk. But you fellow Americans know what I mean, right? You have the same feelings. Now, do you remember Jehu? You end time prophecy students will know what I'm talking about. Jonathan Cahn likened Donald Trump to Jehu in his book, The Paradigm. I didn't read that, by the way. I just listened to his messages. Now, Jehu was a warrior, not a politician. He was chosen by God to undo all the evil Ahab and Jezebel had done. Jehu started out well. He got rid of Jezebel and Baal worship. But you need to understand, Jehu was not a good king. The northern kingdom of Israel had no good kings. The southern kingdom of Israel at least had some good kings. But sadly, the northern kingdom had none. Zero. Jehu did do what God commanded by getting rid of Jezebel and Baal worship. But he didn't follow the Lord. This was his life. 2 Kings 10. But Jehu took no heed to walk in the law of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart, for he did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, who had made Israel sin. In those days, the Lord began to cut off parts of Israel. So, will an upheaval happen and the U.S. begin to decline? Will there be another mortgage meltdown where people can't pay their bills? Will the Lord start cutting off America's might? Will some world governments crumble during this crisis? I don't know. I'm just going to watch and wait on the Lord because he's doing something. I just don't know what it is yet. Stay safe. Don't go out and do stupid things and say, God will protect me. Exercise some wisdom. Don't go licking toilets like some of these millennials. I have no clue what's wrong with that generation. And you'll be okay. God bless you. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.